Hello and welcome. We have done a report on the Swedish environmental objectives, and this is the results of our findings with objectives. In the 1990s, the Swedish environmental objects were created to clarify the environmental dimension of sustainable development. The objectives have been linked to what anthropogenic factors in society that are affecting different environmental issues, where zero eutrophication, clean air, and sustainable development is some of the objectives. Some intermediate targets have been worked out to clarify direction and speed when working to carry out the objectives. The human health, biological diversity, cultural environment, and cultural historical values are some of the criteria. The long-term ecosystem to reproduce, and finally spending the natural resources in a responsible way. During the 20th century, the human population has increased rapidly, and at the same time, enormous environmental challenges has occurred both globally, nationally, and locally. The relation between human population and environmental issues is complex, but there is some clear connections. For example, growing population demands more agricultural land for food production, larger population generates more waste, but at the same time technology is developed and the natural resources can be used more effectively. Okay?
Please move a bit.
So, clean air. The clean air objective is to have pollutions low enough not to be harmful for human health or animals, plants or cultural assets. Air pollution dangerous to the health is the inhalable particles, ground level ozone and some specific hydrocarbons. Ground level ozone is as well toxic to some plants. It has been known for some time that emissions from traffic contains particles causing cancer, and in newer research also shows that airborne particles can cause serious breathing troubles. The Industrial Revolution and the widespread use of the steam machine led to dramatic increase of fossil fuel use, specifically coal with its bad effects on the air environment. What side effects could cause was known as early as the 1890s, but it took quite a while before it was accepted by society. It has taken quite some time before people realized we need to slow down the burning of fossil fuels as well as to find alternatives. Recently people have really gotten their eyes open for the sun and wind power for private persons as a substitute for using coal and oil for heating houses. One reason for that might be the subsidizing by the government for installation. This is important for a future development towards less pollutants. Today most emissions of air pollutants comes from the traffic sector. In cities the burning of wood is also a contributing factor, since the small particles can travel a far distance with the wind, so air pollution are both a local and global problem. Okay. The aim for this objective is that the substances created or released by society should not be a threat to humans or biodiversity. And the substances foreign to nature shall be on levels low enough not to be a threat to human or ecosystems. Scientists constantly find new substances that have spread in the environment. New organic substances are created in the industry all the time, and in Sweden about 20,000 of these substances are used and hundreds of new is invented every year. Many of these substances are found in the fauna, and then they also can be expected in human bodies. The concentrations are still low, but testing high concentration of these substances on animals have often been damaging. Toxic substances and pesticides that can't be degraded will increase the concentration through a food chain, leaving the top predators with much higher concentration than found in the soil or water. This phenomenon is known as biomagnification. Okay. The aim for this objective is that the substances created or released by society should not be a threat to human or biodiversity, and the substances foreign to nature shall be on levels low enough not to be a threat to humans or ecosystems. Scientists constantly find... no, I think you're really... Mm-hmm. I think we have a technical issue there. Okay. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. The environmental objectives in this case is to preserve the flowing water because of a lot of species count on it for their survival. This issue is caused. The issue in this case is a lot of outside activities are affecting the biota, which contributes with bacteria and makes it harder to keep the water clean enough for us to drink it. A good way to preserve the ecosystem is to set up clear boundaries about which concentration of waste you may release from a source and how close to the lake you may build. With these regulations, it will be easier to keep a good balance in the lakes and rivers. Next, please. Yep, there's someone. Striking a balance between the natural and anthropogenic factors such as increased nourishment, introduction of genetically modified farming species, ballast carried alien species, human developments and increased boating is crucial to achieve a stable ecological environment. The challenges of achieving a balanced environment in our coastal and offshore waters is mainly a transboundary nature of the solution required in both Sweden and internationally to reduce these emissions, but also negatively impacting actions that contribute to a more unbalanced ecological situation. The aim states that the value of forest and forest land for biological production must be protected at the same time as biological diversity and cultural heritage and recreational assets are safeguarded. However, this object is closely related to climate changes that pollutes air and acidifies forests, as well as increasing temperature. These effects makes it harder to maintain the present flora and fauna. More forests needed protection to elevate this issue. The forest industry needs to adapt in order to keep the diverse forest environment and if they are to keep the economical incentive. To preserve biological diversity you also need trees that die naturally since they are important habitat for life in the forest. They become breeding ground for mooses, lichens, mushrooms and insects. Due to cutting off trees before they get to this stage, these habitats are decreasing. The big bird prey that need big and durable trees for the nest are affected as well. Okay. So, this objective aims to preserve the pristine character of the mountain environment. This includes biological diversity, recreational value, natural and cultural assets. A sustainable development within all activities regarding these values is to be respected and encouraged. Areas of particular value are to be protected against disturbance of all kind. There are many stakeholders with particular interest in these areas for different reasons. Tourism, wind power, water power and mining industries are among the ones with interest, which can damage parts of values mentioned earlier. There are big parts of the mountain with protection, but there are still areas without, and they have to tackle the growth of more wind farms and the increase of mining prospects. In the mountain areas there is also an increase of usage of snowmobile, which affects the quality of the environment first and foremost by the noise. Nature conservation and outdoor recreation began as a principle in the beginning of the 20th century, and much of the incentive was monetary rather than scientific and cultural. Applying a conservation mark on a region that lacked economical interest met little resistance. It had, however, been easy to revoke in order to make the conservation mark decree pass if people found valuable in the ground afterwards. However, with increased tourism to the countryside, the interest for conservation and outdoor recreation grew, and different organizations supporting the environment conservation gained a lot more traction. There's a rich biodiversity in Sweden when it comes to plant and animals, and there are plenty of different environments to inhabit. The overarching trend is, however, that many species that was exploiting the old methods of anthropogenic farming is declining due to their lack of support in modern day. Those, together with the development of new exploits such as fish farming, grants a heavy nutrient load and are negatively affecting marine environments. This leads to recess of ecological capacity that we might have to grow reliant on, as they no longer can support the same level of service, such as purifying water and air, as well as storing carbon and pollinating crops. You can take the Sami population as an example. They started hunting reindeer. They sold their fur and butter and wheat and ate their meat. However, the Sami population exploded and almost doubled in 40 years, which put a higher demand to feed the population. This was a problem since there were not too many reindeers left. So instead of hunting the reindeer, they started breeding them instead as a more sustainable way to deal with the problem. Okay, now Douglas. Welcome. Okay.
The overall aim of this objective is to stabilize the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere to a level that will prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system. Further, this stabilization is to be done in a way that in a pace and that preserves biological diversity, assures food production, and without jeopardizing other goals for sustainable development. However, the level of greenhouse gases have increased a lot recently and will affect the climate. Carbon dioxide, marine methane and chlorofluorocarbons and nitrous oxide and also water vapor are examples of greenhouse gases. Coal, crude oil and natural gas. It's also grouped as fossil fuels. Fossil fuels because they originate from the net primary production of ultraviolet light, anthropos that lives millions of years ago. This energy and the carbon content have been produced during a long time is now released into the atmosphere in a very high speed, causing the concentration of carbon dioxide to rise. The burning of fossil fuels is the biggest contributor to the increase of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. But also agriculture and change in land use are big contributors. The large amount of cattle breeding is contributing to the emissions of methane, and the change of landscape have changed the carbon sinks. Natural acidification on this objective is about acidification on land and in waters to reduce the anthropogenic impact on that increase in acidification. Soils in forest areas, lakes and streams are often naturally acidic, but the acidification has been speeded up by human actions. A too acidic environment can be harmful for plants and animals. It also increases the corrosion of materials. Acid rain is an example of acidifying processes. The burning of fossil fuel emits sulfur dioxide that will in the atmosphere be converted to sulfur trioxide that bundles with moisture and form very acidic drops of water that later fall down as precipitation. The use of forest as a resource is also altering the acidification. As mentioned, the soil in forest areas are often naturally acidic because the trees take up base cations when growing, and in the natural forest these base cations will be released again when the biomass is degraded. However, the forest today extracts a lot of biomass and that speeds up the acidification. With a growing demand for biomass for biofuel, the extraction of logging residues have increased, and these part of the trees usually have the highest concentration of the base cations. The ozone layer, a protective ozone layer. The ozone layer in the atmosphere protects life on Earth from harmful levels of radiation from external sources. The reduction or thinning of this layer is therefore will pose a threat. to humans and almost all other living organisms. The increased level of UV radiation increases the risk, for example, skin cancer. It also suppresses the immune system and increases the risk for contracting eye cataracts. To prevent reduction of this layer is thus imperative. Thinning of the ozone layer is mostly due to anthropogenic substances that alter and or dissolves the ozone and hampers the production. Such substances might be the chlorinated compounds that can be found in some fridges, air conditioning systems, and foam plastics. Since 1987, there has been an international agreement called the Montreal Protocol that requires assigned countries to ban and restrict the use of ozone-depleting substances. So far, the treaty has been deemed a success, as emissions have been practically halted, although these substances still linger in use and in the atmosphere. In addition, measuring the ozone layers for ozone levels in the atmosphere is difficult due to many connected complex factors, such as rising level of nitrous oxide that makes prediction difficult. The aim for this environmental objective is to make sure that water will not reach levels of phosphorus and nitrogen that can harm humans drinking it or the ecosystems in the water. The main problem as today is that it affects the biota in the lakes due to the change in nutrient values. When it goes from a nutrient-poor stage to a nutrient-rich stage, it makes it hard for some species to adapt, and one of the main issues is that algae blooms due to nutritional increases consumes a lot of oxygen. And with these processes going on, species like fish will struggle to survive. The ambition is to lower these values of nitrogen and phosphorus for both the long term and the short term. One big factor for eutrophication is the agriculture, which contributes with its runoff water from fertilizers into soil and then later water. A good quality groundwater. The aim of this objective is to provide a safe and sustainable supply of drinking water from groundwater sources, as well as to contribute towards viable habitats for flora and fauna in lakes and in watercourses. Groundwater is very important, since it affects the ecosystems that rely on the same water. The biggest concern as of today affecting the groundwater is the agriculture, as well as the road salting during winter. The salt does not only get into the groundwater, but also damages pipework used to extract the water as well. The problem that this could be that the people moving out to their summer homes more than before, thus putting a higher demand for drinking water from groundwater. Thriving wetlands. The definition of this objective is that the ecological and water-conserving function of wetlands in the landscape must be maintained and the value of wetlands preserved for the future. Wetlands are a habitat for many plants and animal species. They provide many ecological and water-conserving functions. Since the beginning of the 19th centuries, 1/4 of the wetlands in Sweden has disappeared. This is largely extent due to the drainage causing the wetlands to overgrow. Climate change is now also a threat to the sensitive ecosystems of the wetlands. Humans have interfered with the phosphorus cycle and increased the availability of phosphorus in the environment. There is a correlation between low levels of phosphorus and endangered plant species. High levels of phosphorus available in the environment have a reducing effect on robustness in wet and moist areas. A varied agricultural landscape. The aim for this objective is to protect the values of the farm landscape in agricultural lands. For food production, while also preserving and strengthening the biological diversity of the cultural heritage. To maintain the diversity of the biological and cultural environment, it is necessary to find a way that both stops the ongoing trend of farming plots being abandoned, as well as limiting more intense specialized agriculture. The continued mechanization and transition to bigger farms have a big impact on the biodiversity of the agricultural landscapes. When small plots are turning into big, there are a lot of small-scale habitats disappearing. With them, the last refuge for some wild plants and animals in the agricultural landscape. Since the 1940s, there has been a decrease in agricultural business of over 80%. The change has largely been made in the southern and middle parts of Sweden, where the landscape now has become increasingly flatter than ever. Another part of the development is to find a balance between profitable and sustainable, to make sure that the land stays productive in the future, as well as at the same time taking care of the natural and cultural values. Much to the objectives of sustainable forests, the challenges is to keep farming competitive and at the same time preserve livestock and croplands that might prove important in the future. To keep the biological diversity and the cultural heritage, it is necessary that many parts of this society involved contributes and works together, from the EU to the municipalities. A good built environment. The aim of this objective is that the settled environment should not adversely affect health, but also contribute to a good regional and global environment. Both natural and cultural values are to be taken care of and be developed. Buildings and facilities must be located and shaped in an environmentally adapted way, as well as having a long-term housekeeping with land, water and other resources. In the beginning of the urbanization and industrialization, their living conditions for people living in cities were very poor, compared to people living, for example, on the countryside. The main reason for this was the waste treatment. In the countryside, farmers would just use the training waste as new fertilizers for the land. But in the cities, the waste was commonly disposed of in the streets, which caused a lot of disease. This was not until the installation of sewer and water pipes that the mortality dropped. However, a lot of the new inventions, for example waste treatment, would likely cause disturbance in another system. When industry began to expand in Sweden, the demand for raw materials such as water for cooling purposes and wood for construction increased. The uses of this material saw no limit at the time. It went so far that the region in Skåne almost had a drought because of all the excessive use of groundwater. So instead of slowing down the uses of the resources to let it recover, they tried to find another solution, such as feeding water from other areas to keep up the demand for the products. It was not until the mid-60s that the government made a plan called the Fiscal National Planning, which meant that the different parts of the different sectors, such as agriculture and industry, had to claim what part of Sweden was the most interesting for their activities. This was so that the government could easily structure which actors were active where. There was also an increase in population in cities, which raises the demand for transportation and noise reduction, as well as green areas such as parks. There is much to be done with the inhabited areas for providing more sustainable development and good environment in general. Some of the challenges ahead are to keep the developed areas' cultural values and decreasing the effects from bad in-house environment and to minimize hazardous waste. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Anyone got any questions? Daniel, do you have a question for us? About some?
Yeah. Spontaneously. I'm curious. Why did you decide? First of all, why did you decide on this project?
Excuse me.
Why did you decide on this study? Why?
Oh, we had several projects to present that we had gotten feedback on before.
Okay, so you started.
So, yes, we had a previous project that we made regarding the Swedish environmental objectives, and more specifically the was it greenhouse gases? The
planetary boundaries.
Yeah, the planetary boundaries.
We had to choose of two different projects, either this 16 environmental objectives or planetary boundaries.
Okay.
So we chose this one because.
Well, yeah, I think we had a feedback on it and couldn't make the adjustment rather easy for the project.
Are you going to continue with this to develop into more, or is this a finish?
No, this is actually, I think, our second presentation.
Yeah.
We had the presentation first when we made the first project, and now we have the second with the revised material.
Okay. Nothing more. Thank you very much.
Thank you.